Hey, a quick note before we start. Year end is here, which means it's time for my annual donation request spiel. If this podcast has been valuable to you, please visit exploreifs.com/donate. Your support keeps this work going and helps me provide coaching and resources to people who couldn't access it otherwise. And can't donate? No problem. Leave a review instead to help others find this content. All right, let's get into this week's episode. Welcome back to IFS Meditations and Insights. I'm Tim Fortescue, your guide on this journey toward wholeness through the lens of internal family systems. Together, we're creating a sacred space to explore, accept, and love all parts of ourselves. As we do this work, we open ourselves to experiencing divine love and living more authentically. Let's begin. Today in this special episode, I'm joined by Jason Shiers, a psychotherapist, transformative coach, and deep thinker whose work bridges healing and awakening. For more than 25 years, Jason has walked alongside people navigating trauma, addiction, and recovery, bringing both professional skill and lived experience to the conversation. He's the author of a new book that we'll discuss that explores how the path of recovery and awakening are not separate, but part of the same unfolding. In our conversation today, we'll dive into some of the themes from his book, exploring how the wisdom of non-duality and the compassion of internal family systems can come together, revealing that even our most protective or painful parts are expressions of something sacred and whole. So let's get to the conversation with Jason Shiers. Well, Jason, so grateful to just have some time and to connect with you. You know, it's a good sign when I notice that, wow, if he doesn't show up, which I had no indication that you wouldn't, but parts of me would have been disappointed. And so that's a good thing. And so I'm excited to get to know you a little bit. And so, yeah, we're just going to have a conversation. And why don't you share just a little more about you? And for folks who are listening, Jason, I got an email. We connected. We don't know each other much more beyond that. And so really just genuinely excited to get to know you along with lots of other people. So yeah, just tell us more about you as a way of introduction.
Yeah. I'm in the northwest of the UK, and I never know how much or how little to share. You know, I have a love-hate relationship with titles. You know, I like to say I'm just a human being on the journey. You know, but it seems sometimes if I say I'm a psychotherapist and I'm a coach, that people listen more. You know, and I think that's our social conditioning. But yeah, I am just a human being on the journey of life. You know, and I've been through what you might call a lot of adversity in my early life, a lot of struggle, a lot of darkness. I was thrown through the mental health system, should we say, as a young child into being medicated for depression when I was just 10 years old. And that led to many years of escapism, addictions, and psychiatric sectioning, hospitalization, chaos, diagnosis, and it really ignited my fire for hatred of the psychiatric system, really, you know. And I guess, well, I got clean from drugs when I was 23 through the 12 steps, you know, which was 31 years ago. So I'm clean, abstinent that long, sober that long. But my addiction just carried on in a different shape and form, you know, and the psychiatric stuff carried on in different forms. I became a psychotherapist and I became a coach and I did all sorts of stuff like the Hoffman process, the Landmark Forum, Tony Robbins, silent meditations, trying to find myself, so to speak. You know, in the process of becoming a psychotherapist and getting multiple modalities of qualification, I mean, I've got a long list of psychotherapy qualifications and credentials, which I don't use at all really in my work today because I think they're pretty useless, really. But it was great to do them because I thought, well, it's definitely not this. There's no answers here, you know, after 4 years of doing an advanced transactional analysis course, you know, and getting qualifications, I thought, well, I don't feel any better than I did at the start, really. There's still a lot of darkness. There's still secret addictions. And I don't think I understand myself any better than I did at the start. How come I still behave in these ways? And all that stuff eventually led me to spiritual awakening. It led me to that. It wasn't so much dark night of the soul. It was more like a, dark life, I called it spinning plates. I was always spinning the health, wealth and relationships plates, desperately trying to find respite from myself in external things. And I had the realization that life was happening inside of me, not outside of me, that there was nothing I could do outside of me to help me find peace inside of me. And I was fabricating the story using my own mind on a daily basis of all these things that had happened that I was a victim of, this hard life. And I was suffering on behalf of this separate self that was really just an experience of my own thoughts and perception, and I realized that I was the observer of this experience happening inside of me daily that I was suffering on behalf of, to the point where it just opened up a small gap into the realization that my suffering is not anything to do with the past. It's to do with my relationship with myself and my noticing and seeing of who I am beyond the pathology, beyond all the years of psychiatric diagnosis. And that really transformed my practice. It's how I found IFS. It's how I got into non-duality. It's how I moved towards things that really helped me discover who I was by looking at my internal makeup, my internal world, versus trying to find ways to patch up my behavior on the outside, or trying to stop having toxic relationships, or trying to, change my behavior towards people that I didn't like. All these things that I was focused on before that I thought were somehow the problem, realization that they were only the symptom. And in all that, I wrote a book. I know we're not on video, but that's my book.
And for folks who are listening, you can catch this on my YouTube channel if there are visuals that you hear about, and I'll put that in the notes. But yes, tell us more.
Yeah, that's my book. And the subtitle is The Intelligence of Addiction. It's really like a seeing of if you speak IFS language, you'll know that there's no bad parts, and after years of condemnation of parts of myself, of hatred, of desperate to change, I realized that all of it was intelligence playing out, that there was parts of me that were fragmented, if you want, like shut down, suppressed, repressed, hidden, fearful, terrorized, desperately wanting to be loved, and so on. And that journey to myself that I went on over these last 10 years, I guess, in IFS, in non-duality, in somatic experiencing, in all those ways, sort of seeing the intelligence of all those parts playing out, really, and seeing that there's nothing ever wrong. There's just an internal experience happening. And the book is really, it's about my journey, but it's really about my own process that I've created of working with people, seeing things through the lens of intelligence, that nothing is ever faulty, nothing is ever wrong, nothing is ever broken, really, there is just a misunderstanding. The world of pathology is created through man's desperate attempt to find problem and solution. And actually, it's what I call iatrogenic. It sets out to solve something, but actually creates the illusion of a problem, a broken self, that needs a therapist or a psychiatrist or a doctor to fix it, which is not true at all. In fact, it can't be resolved that way. Nothing can be resolved that way. And it can only perpetuate the illusion of brokenness and further perpetuate the suffering, in that relationship. So, yeah, that's how I got here in a short way. I mean, there's a lot more to it than that, but that's how I got here.
Yeah, well, I resonate with so much of that. And, well, first of all, the titles and the non-pathologizing. And I had someone ask me the other night, like, what do you do for a living? And I struggle with those titles. And I said, coach, but man, there's so much with coaching, and I'm not a therapist. I'm so grateful to be trained in IFS, and this modality has changed my career and my world. But I told the guy, coach, therapist, just to keep it simple. But parts of me, like, who am I? And I love just the freedom of, the labels. I mean, we're conditioned around labels, and sometimes they're important and they're helpful. Sometimes they're not. But the labels, the non-duality, spirituality, your journey. Could you tell me, and you can ask me anything too. I guess I am the interviewer here, but you can ask me anything and we can have a conversation. But non-duality, just a little more about what that is. And it was in your sharing, it was there, but to someone who may be saying, what is that? And just curious if you
Yeah.
get a little more insight there.
Yeah. As I see it, non-duality is a concept like any other. However, it's probably people find non-duality who've been seekers for a long time, like seekers into something bigger than themselves, seekers into who they are, seekers into what is the meaning of life. If those questions are important for you, then non-duality is perhaps, a worthwhile place to be curious. And it is a spiritual concept where we get to investigate our role, our perceived role here, as a human being and who we are. I might call myself Jason, but I existed before that name. I was born without a name. So does that mean I'm Jason, or does that mean I'm something more than that? So that type of investigation, and where I imagine it would really lead anybody, where it led me was that seeing that I am not my thoughts, I am not that. I'm something bigger than that. There's something bigger. I am the awareness of all, and I don't ever ask anyone to believe that, but upon investigation, that's the conclusion that you can come to and see for yourself. So it's really a spiritual concept with the experiential journey. If you're willing to look, you're willing to question your own experience, you're willing to question, who am I? And look, like really look, like, well, am I this feeling that I'm saying I am? Am I this name? Am I this age? Am I this role, this job title? No, I'm not that. Are those things essential to me? No. Did I exist before them? Yes. Okay, so that's my investigation to my realization. You have to do that yourself. I would never try and convince anyone that that's the truth, but upon investigation, I see that you will come to that conclusion for yourself. So it's a spiritual concept. It doesn't, what I think is a big misunderstanding in non-duality is transcendence. I think there's a belief in transcendence, that if I could just understand this concept well enough, that I would no longer be human, that I could do some sort of Jedi mind trick to evade my physical and somatic experience of being a human being. And I think that's a misunderstanding in the concept, that people, especially people that have suffered and experienced a vast amount of darkness in their human experience, really hope for. The mind wants freedom, it wants bliss, it wants to escape. And when people come across it, they think, oh, this is the new way, the way, as if there is one way to freedom. And I don't see it as about that, but it gives me, and what I've seen it give others, is a place to stand where my human experience I don't take so seriously, and I'm more at peace and at home with myself, not being a perfect human being, but being a byproduct of my own conditioning and a byproduct of my own experience. And it's really contributed towards my quality of life,
When I love that too, and just the idea of not taking ourselves so seriously, or being more playful in that is something I'm really stepping into and embracing more too. And I want you to know too, like, keep promoting your book, and we'll put those whatever links, and we'll get some more information at the end of our conversation so folks can find and check that out more. But when you say spirituality too, and that's another issue, the like labels, identity, spirituality, and who we are, that's another thing with me and my background. And I'm not here to put, I love spirituality, I'm not here to push anything. And just the idea of, I can't make this for you. It's like you have your own experience, and it does. What I'm finding is that instead of being so much fear-based and tethered, if I just let go, there is some natural grounding that happens. And so my background is, I'm also seminary trained, which complicates things even more sometimes. And when I found kind of this, I transitioned careers about 5 years ago from church work to this. I mean, influencer, I guess is what, or I am. I'm an influencer and doing an IFS practitioner. but I was close to leaving my faith, which I'm Christian, but Universalist too. Talk about non-duality, and some people just get really confused with that. And when they find me, like, who is this guy? And I have parts that say, yeah, who is this guy? But tell me, I'd love to hear more of your journey. I'm throwing a lot out there, and ask me questions for clarifications if you need to. But
Yeah.
just no labels, no pathology, freedom, but a grounding that happens in a beautiful way, and just finding who I am. And so I'd love to hear more about spirituality. That's a buzzword now,
Yeah.
and how that has played out for you. And then as I throw all this out to you, kind of how does that land? What does it stimulate there?
Yeah. Well, I can talk the spiritual language. My book was actually endorsed by Rupert Spira. I put his little comment for me on the back cover. And so I can kind of talk to people who are real spiritual seekers and understand the language of awareness. But the book is not written that way. I use very simple language. Because I remember when I did a podcast with Rupert a few years back, we talked about this kind of spectrum of experience. And he said that he gets people right at the end of their journey, when they're ready to hear about spirituality. But I'm taking people from the depths of darkness, from mental health struggle and addiction, and trying to move them along this metaphoric spectrum, so to speak, towards themselves, And so the book is written in a very simple language.
So people that are at rock bottom, is that another way to put it? Yeah.
Well,
Or
yeah.
tell me, what does that bring up?
Yeah, it brings up that it's a challenge, when people can't even get a day clean, for example, in their addiction, to actually expect anybody to read any book and take anything in. I suggest that people have some form of stability, which can be found through rehab, detox, or 12-step meetings or something, like before they try and understand a paradigm shift in who they are, and how life works.
Yeah. And I'm curious. Yeah. And I have many therapists, practitioners who listen to this podcast. They share this resource with their clients. And I'm sure there are many who have people. I know there are that are there. And I'm not far away at times, or I get it in my own way. But my point is, could you take us to rock bottom and kind of have that for people who are listening, who are at, where do I go from here? And I mean, there's hope, but it doesn't make it makes sense that they may struggle with that right now.
Yeah, my heart goes out to anyone struggling. I think it's a horrible place to be, to not be able to have hope. To not be able to think what's coming next, or to not know. It's true. It doesn't have to be the only way, rock bottom. I've written about this before in different ways, but it's true that people can change for any reason. They may have an insight, they may have an epiphany, they may have somebody close to them may get a terminal illness, and all of a sudden their life gets put into perspective quickly, to the point where they go, what am I doing to myself? And they just change. I've seen all these things happen, but it's true that mostly people have to get to a place of desperation before they get sick and tired of being themselves, and I think that's not, we call it rock bottom, but what actually are we talking about? We're talking about heaviness, and heavy energy. We're talking about hopelessness, the feeling of hopelessness, like there's no light, nothing looks good, nothing looks hopeful. And then a person carrying the weight of that in their waking, when they're not intoxicated or escaping themselves, trying to be in that energy within themselves, So that's what motivates people to change, That's what certainly motivated me to change. And from there, that okay, I've had enough now. That decision is made. I need to do something about this. There's change. Then wherever you are in the world, there's going to be different options. There's going to be different options. It could be the 12 steps. It could be anonymous meetings of different types. It could be the local services. It could be a rehab, detox, depending on your state of desperation and your state of physical health. There's so many different options to find stability. What I always say to people, though, is engage in those things if that's where you are, what you need. Put your life first, put your health first. But very quickly, as I see it, those services and options become limitations. Become a new ideology that we take on as the ultimate way, and because we're vulnerable. Because when we're desperate and we're in a dark time and it's in a rock bottom, we're in a vulnerable state. And we're open. That's why people say when they go to 12 steps, I would have done anything, and it's quite true. They would have done anything, and they did. They took on a new belief that they're flawed and damaged and broken, and they subscribed to that belief. And many people still 10, 20, 30 years later still subscribe to that belief that they're broken, not realizing that it's really a subtle form of victimhood, that there's a false ceiling been imposed, not realizing that they are the infinite potential of the entire universe, just like all of us are. They just don't know that. And so, yeah, that's kind of how I see it, with the rock bottom and the desire to change and how that stuff comes about and how I really speak to people about it.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I'm thinking about my family here in the U.S. I come from Appalachia, which is the South, kind of poor, white. That's where I come from in my family. And so that background, and I'm one of the first, and there are parts of me that are proud that I've broken some cycles, but also just, I don't know how I've done it in many ways. And there is privilege that has come in there, but you're at rock bottom. You have that desperation, like anything, but then you don't have resources, and it's so hard to get out of that. And I'm curious, just clients who have come to you, your work, are there stories that you have there of how that's played out?
Yeah, so many, so many different ones. The way I go about it is that, first of all, I want people to know that they're okay. And what I'm doing is not a model of illness, it's a model of well-being. Let's come and let's find out what's right with you instead of I'm going to help you fix what's wrong with you. And people will often say to me, you're the first person that's ever said that to me, like when I explain nervous system adaptation and when I explain reaching for something outside of yourself when your internal experience is of overwhelm makes perfect sense. It's a biological response to an internal, level of adversity that's going on. People are like, oh, wow, like they start to try and find out more things, what's right with them. Oh, that's interesting. It's kind of like, and quite often they've been through a system that's pathologized them, given them labels, diagnosis, and so on and stuff like that. Sometimes they're invested in that, and it takes me a while of kind of helping them see, like experientially helping them see, not telling them. I'm not giving them information, holding space and moving them through transformation through an experiential seeing into who they are and how their mind operates. Like they've got a belief in pathology. Where did it come from? A professional. Where did the professional get it from? Where did it originate? Like what's the source of that? Okay, well, it came from the DSM. Where did the DSM come from? Like, have you read a book about how people sat around debating, like out of I could qualify for 6 out of 9, no 7 out of 9. Or how is it 3 months? Is it 6 months? How do we measure the intensity? If you've read the books about that, then you'll see that just like all of us, we all have the same source of wisdom. We have an open path to for insight to pass through us. And that's what they created in that moment. But you, my client, in this moment, are no different to those people. You can have a source of insight coming through you as to what's right for you right now. And helping people see and trust in their body. Like my body feels like a no to this. It's closing. I feel it. Or it's a yes to this. I feel it expanding, and opening. All these things are part of the work, the mind and the body. The meeting of non-duality and trauma is how I would explain it to a therapist or a professional who understood those terms. We're working at that meeting point. And my IFS therapy that I do is non-dual IFS. Not that I do, but I show up for myself as a client. I do with a therapist who practices non-dual IFS, which is a mixture of both that really understands the spiritual and the concept of IFS merged together.
And I'm with the trauma that you had mentioned, and maybe this is for practitioners who are listening, or with me. I was in my own therapy session this week, and I mean, I coach, I do this with clients all the time, but I hate being the client, and I go inside. Yeah, and sometimes nothing, like that numbing, that dissociation. Can you speak some insight to that? So when that non-duality meets.
Mm.
You said it meets what?
Well, it's what I call my work is really the meeting of non-duality and trauma. So it's really
Yes,
is that understanding of our of it. So by that I mean there's a truth of the absolute, the non-duality stuff, and there's a truth of the relative, which you might sort of work through in IFS, the parts, the relative body, the somatic system, the conditioned nervous system, the protector parts, the exile parts, and so on. They're all relatively true to you as a physical human being in your biology. But that doesn't negate the fact that absolutely we are just pure awareness I'm pure awareness having an experience of being Jason that I'm creating in my mind, as an illusion that's happening. Both are true, like both and, yes, there's an absolute, and yes, there's a relative. So the understanding of that lets me hold that investigation of the somatic much more lightly because I'm more willing, and not that that takes away from the numbness, the biological reaction and so on. I call numbness something rather than nothing, it's like, because that is also a shut down state, right? Maybe a functional freeze state or something that's playing out. But people have less tendency with that awareness of who they are and the reality of the absolute, the truth of the absolute, to escape,
for sure. And I even had someone this week met with me, and because the somatics, that's another thing that people are curious about, and that the nothing is something. And
Yeah.
that's what I found with my own work when I go inside. What? Yeah, let's just be with that. Is it okay for the nothing, the nam, and the idea that that is something? And I know sometimes too I love that phrase, the non-duality meeting the trauma, and just pausing though. But yeah, my body, focus on my body. Like what about me? Like I'm worthless. I mean, it can go bad. I mean, not bad. It can keep going. That idea of worthlessness, and we're something. We're whole. We were
Mm.
made whole. We're not these wounds that we carry. There's so much hope in that, but making that connection to the body. Like, what if I know my body just softens, my system softens why don't you just be with that sensation? Nothing else. And there's hope in that, but it's so hard to do because we're not conditioned.
Yeah, like if you look through the polyvagal lens, don't know if you're familiar with polyvagal, but if you look through the polyvagal study material, like in the term neuroception, um, relates to the experience of the physical and somatic interpretation of life, like the perception of life through the five senses. Stephen Porges claims that up to 80% of experience is perceived through the nervous system before the mind. So the body is creating a large percentage of experience, not via the top-down method, which we would have practiced perhaps 20 years ago in therapy, but more from the bottom up, either through the somatic experience. Why it's more valuable for me sometimes to say, when someone talks about self-hatred or self-loathing, so what's going on in the body right now? Like, where do you notice tension and so on? Because there's something happening there, like the stories of the mind are one part of it. But actually, for me, they're quite often just an indicator that there's something going on that's been suppressed and is playing out on a nervous system level. So you reminded me of a point that I wanted to make. The reason I talk about the pinnacle of nervous system and somatic work and non-duality is because without an understanding of non-duality, people come to trauma work, and what they do is they unknowingly adopt a new label, a new post-it note, trauma survivor. They go, yep, that's right. You're right. You've got it. That's because of my childhood. That's because my father was never there. It's because my mother did this to me. But they don't know that they're doing this because they haven't understood the depth of our creation as a human being. They don't know that they're actually innocently adopting a new pathology, and it's a subtle form of victimhood again that they go away with and stick this post-it note on themselves. When they have an understanding of non-duality, of how that works, how it all operates, they're more likely to say, I use those words so you and other people can understand me. I might say, I'm having a sensation, energy is moving in my body. this is happening. There's a tightness, there's a contraction, and so on. I'm less likely to attribute that to a story about my childhood with a I might talk about those things, because it helps me get in touch with stuff. But there's a raw awareness of the truth of what's happening without the concepts layered over the top of it that contribute towards the pathologizing story that we go away with, And that's why I like the mixture of kind of the non-dual and the trauma work together, because it frees people to a greater degree, as I've seen it, than just going into just spirituality does not work with the somatic, doesn't free people from that. And just trauma work leaves people with a belief in a fault in themselves,
Yeah. And when you had mentioned the idea of, I'm just noticing and this energy inside that is going to, it reminded me too, I was in some learning venue couple months ago. And I'm curious, what do you think about feelings and the labels we put on them rather than just because it's so comforting? I have my feeling wheel that I try to ignore sometimes, but it's so much more freeing for me. Oh, I'm activated, or there's a numbness, which is a feeling, I guess, but a very confusing one. But just the idea, no, I can feel this sensation in my body. There's a softening in my system too there than saying, what am I feeling?
Yeah.
And I'm curious, your research and studies, what do you think about feelings?
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot. I think Gabor Mate talks a lot about the difference between emotion and perception. It's kind of like there's a lot of perception that people will come to me and they'll say, I feel like they did this, or I feel like this happened. And I'll go, well, what feeling is that? Like, where do you feel it? I'm always asking that question, like, where do you feel that? And quite often when people come to me, they will be like, it's here in the head, like everything's in the head, because it's just a thought they're referring to, not a feeling. As you probably know, mostly people are numb. They've numbed out as an intelligent response to the amount of internal discomfort that they have. And at the start of the work with anybody new to this, quite often your work as a therapist is helping them reconnect to their body and sort of become aware of and sort of see what's really happening inside of them. Like I call it going towards yourself. We're gonna learn to go towards yourself. And like you said, at first it'll be, well, nothing. There's nothing there. I don't feel anything. There isn't anything, and it's like getting people, is it okay for nothing to be there? Like, can we stay with nothing for a while, see if anything comes. Maybe you can even welcome nothing, welcome it, see if it's, and do you secretly dislike nothing? You just don't, you want to get rid of it, don't you? Just to see what's going on inside the system of somebody. So to answer your point, I have a lot of feelings myself. I'm very sensitive, very connected to what I call waves of emotional waves, like intense physical, somatic sensations, that bring tears, that bring anger, that bring moments of awe and wonder and beauty to my life, and I don't think anyone can really fully tell you what they are and so on and stuff like that. People have got their theories, and I don't find it that important, that much of a need. There's an experience and we try and put a label on it. That's it. It's just an energy moving, and I think that's, for me, let people say whatever they want to say about it. I'm having this thing move. How does it feel? Like, describe it to me more than give it a name.
Yeah. And as you were thinking, or as you were sharing too, I mean, that in the IFS model, how do you feel toward something we're asking all the time?
Yeah.
But it's more, is there an open heartedness, a closed heartedness, or is there a curiosity or not? Yeah, it can be those. How do you feel toward is a pivotal question. But it's okay just to, how do you feel toward, oh, I hate the numbness. Well, that part's welcome too. And that other one that's saying this, they're all a part of the team, but things are different now. And that's the hope. Yeah, there's hope in that. And I always have like hope. I say to my clients often, you don't hear me speak in absolutes, but when they say they're worthless, it makes sense that that's there, but it's not who you are.
Yeah.
And maybe you don't believe that now, but you're a beautiful human being. Yeah, you're a human being, but there's hope, and it's true. And so it's so encouraging for me there. Well, tell us more. Is there more about the book or what people will get there if they? And we're not quite wrapping up yet, but I want to make sure to give you some space there to share.
Yeah, the book is like my journey through this last 10 years. It talks about my prior life, but just in a chapter. But really, the work that I do with people now and how it developed, how I developed this model of well-being, to work with people because of my own journey through this stuff, because of my awakening experience and then my journey into somatics. And really, sort of, when I found spirituality, I thought that like this was it. This was the panacea, as you said. The nirvana of kind of like all experience. This is the answer I've been looking for my whole life. I am now home. That's it. There's nothing else for me. This is all I need. And then I met a woman, as we do as men. If that's the way you're inclined, you may have met a man, but like I met a woman who I fell in love with. And I'd never had a loving relationship in my life. And I'd longed for love my whole life, and I tried to get it in the relationships where it wasn't available. And I didn't realize I'd chosen those relationships where love was not available for safety. I didn't realize that because I'd made an early childhood decision that love was not safe. So when I met a woman that I fell in love with, I was terrified. I was absolutely terrified because she'd saw me and she loved me. And I didn't know what that was like before. And I started having all sorts of physical contractions and reactions to her. And even though I thought I was cured and I'd found spirituality, the relationship I had with her forced me to go towards myself. Because I was, my somatic reactions and contractions and withdrawal and so on that happened in response to being loved threatened the relationship. So I didn't want to lose the relationship. I thought I'd made it, but I was having this experience that was my direct experience of this moment, and that's when I started investigating what's going on in my body. Like, how is this? So the book was really my journey through that to finding my place of finding well-being, like how do I guide someone to well-being? So the book is not about following my way or anything. It's really about how do I go towards myself? Like, who am I and how do I go towards myself? It's written for you, the reader, about you. And it asks you to question realities that you've created, stories that you've created. It helps unpick the pathology world, like what it's about, where it came from, why it exists, and so on, what its usefulness is, and where it becomes a limitation. And then it helps you investigate yourself through looking through the body, through the mind, through thought. What is thought? What is our experience as a human being? How is it created? And so on. I call it a common sense approach. Most things will seem like common sense. They'll go, yeah, that looks true. That, it's kind of because what I also make clear in the book is I'm not teaching anybody anything here. I'm helping people uncover who they already are, and so it's a very practical, modern twist on spirituality with simple language that helps you go from a journey of darkness to a place of well-being within yourself.
And maybe that goes back. I realized that we talked about spirituality, and then you were saying that your book, yeah, it's really those people, I hesitate to say rock bottom, but those people that are taking that first step toward themselves. And man, I find too, I met a woman too, by the way, and we've been married 15 years and that loves me, but it's so opposite. Like who I am is not anywhere close to who I thought I was because of the stuff, for lack of a better word, that you're talking about, the labels, all but in here and that. And then, yeah, the self-sabotage, and it drove me to therapy, relationships, and drove me, and is still driving me to finding who I am. But it's not who I thought I was. And parts of me still don't believe that that's who I am, but it is. And there's hope and there's a trust. And where I was going with the whole spirituality thing is that when I found IFS 7 years ago or so, I was about to leave my faith, and I may still leave my faith, and I'm going to be fine. That's a very dualistic thing too, I guess, that's beautiful. But when I found this model, it's like I was grounded, and maybe I'm on a slippery slope and I'm loving it or whatnot, but I found a lot of who I am, and even the structures like faith stuff. It's not so it's who I am. Like, it's a lot of who I am, and it doesn't mean you have to be that. And that's why I start talking like a silly person when I say this, because there are parts of me that are still very confused. But the no labels, and that there's a natural grounding, a natural process that's unseen that happens if we trust, and we can keep seeking. And that part that needs the definitives and the absolutes makes sense. But I'm enjoying the mystery right now. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I listen to Osho a lot, and he talks about that life is uncertain. To be a human being, life is insecure. There's no, and it's one of the things I talk about with people often, that as a human being in a physical body, we are unknowingly trying to create certainty where certainty doesn't exist, or security where security doesn't exist, in money and relationships and so on. And to be in the dark, like you said, like to be on that kind of journey of wonder, like, yes, life is unknown, and that is fucking awesome. It's
I
kind of
love it.
like, that's not scary. It's like, actually, you can wake up and go, wow, who knows what's going to happen today? Like, who could I meet that could be so cool? What amazing things might happen? Like, when we've got a fear of uncertainty, we wake up going, oh my God, I've got to keep this job. I need to make sure this is okay. Everything looks dark and desperate, about the uncertainty. But when you understand that is how it is, and only the mind creates the illusion of certainty as an attempt to secure this separate self that doesn't even exist in a reality that's created in my own mind, it's like, it seems crazy.
Really. Yeah. Well, Jason, where do people find more? And I'll link all this in the show notes. But yeah, how can they
Yeah.
find your book and more about you?
My book will be on Amazon, wherever you are, Infinite Recovery Project, or website infiniterecoveryproject.com. You get a link from there. That's the best place to find me.
Okay. What else did I miss, or as we begin to wrap up here?
I mean, I know your podcast about IFS, and like, one reason I never became an IFS practitioner was because I have a bit of a bugbear with concepts, and I think IFS, I call it like I would say it's my seeing is that it's like the Ferrari of therapies. I really think it is the best. But if you give the keys of a Ferrari to a 5-year-old, there's a lot of,
Yeah.
damage could happen. So it's not IFS that's great. It's like it's the use of it, like the tool of it. And the reason I do therapy with somebody who does non-dual IFS, because that part of it is essential to me to know the bigger picture versus just the relative reality. So the reason I never did IFS training was because, one, I don't need to, but two is that, like, I've been indoctrinated into concepts, into 12 steps, into other spiritual ideals over my journey to come to this place. Yeah, they did their job. In the end, I came to the realization that no one is more spiritual than me. No one is more spiritual than you. It's like we're all equally spiritual, and no concept is the way. So no understanding holds all answers. And so I get a little bit, when somebody starts going on about how amazing IFS is, it's the only way, it's the best way, it's the way, blah, blah, blah. I'm just like, I just switch off to that. And that's why I never did it, because I don't want to be attached to any particular concept. I want to be part of people's journey and help them see that they are it. You are it. I am it. Everyone is it. It's inside of you, and that's the only thing that came to mind to mention. That's the only reason. I do think IFS is amazing in the right hands,
For sure, and it's just a tool, and I think we don't talk about it enough in the IFS community too. But it's that self, which is the transcend, like what we're talking about, and it's just that non-duality and who we are, and we keep turning inward. However, that is happening, is where the healing is happening, and it's a beautiful thing, for sure. Yeah,
absolutely.
Well, thank you, Jason. Yeah, I look forward to checking out your book. And so, has it been released yet?
Yeah, it's been
Yes.
released
So it's
about
on
6
there.
months now. Yeah, it's on there
Okay.
now. Yeah.
It's on there. Well, yeah, check out the book. Tell me the title one more time, because I'm going to get it. I haven't read. I should probably do more prep before I do these things, but I do a little AI research, and I want to read the book. I'm intrigued, and I hope others are too. Tell me the title again.
Infinite Recovery Project.
Okay, perfect. Well, thanks so much for reaching out and
Thank you.
yeah, for your courage and showing up and having this conversation, Jason.
Awesome. Thank you.
That wraps up another episode of IFS Meditations and Insights. If you found value in today's session, please follow, subscribe, and share with others who might benefit. Your positive review helps more people discover this healing work. For more IFS meditations and resources, and to join the faithfully growing community, visit exploreifs.com. Until next time, be gentle with yourself.